course, in the UK and in Europe, there's been a heavy focus on carbon, and energy is a derivative of carbon. I think, actually, that what may happen in Europe, particularly with the economic downturn, and in the UK, is what I feel is the argument that we have to make it in the United States, is that carbon is a derivative of energy. And I think about this because that is one of the best ways, I think, in which to look at energy efficiency. Number one, and number two, carbon, whether you measure it by cubic meters or by tons or whatever you choose to do, carbon is what? You know, is it how much carbon is in this piece of paper? How much carbon is, went into making this little flexible stand for this microphone? Everybody understands dollars and cents. And right now, it's really the value proposition of carbon, which is hard to define, whereas the value of a watt or BTU is much easier to define. When we're competing for dollars, I'll get into that in my comments which follow the slideshow. I think it makes a difference. So the converging forces, we need to be more sustainable, energy supply constraints, all of these different federal, state, and local, obviously that's an Americanization of what you deal with. The corporate trend towards GRI or CSR, or however you want to refer to it locally. And the fact is that there are pressures. People want to participate in this. And I got to agree with Robert. The environment's not some place where we go to visit, admire, think about preserving, then come home. The environment's where we live and work. And that's on what we have to work. That's with what we have to work. That's where we need to make our impacts, because we don't live with polar bears. We live with each other. And I love the folks who go to check out the Arctic and then come home and don't alter how they live their lives. Business opportunity. This is really happening. In the United States, there's a practice now amongst the appraisal industry participants to begin to look at the latent, uncalculated, off-balance sheet exposure to energy efficiency and wasteful practices. When you think about this, that's what the UK is trying to accomplish with the grading systems on buildings, though it's presently without teeth. Same thing in Europe, European Union, I guess, initiative there. But the concept that it's not just you get an A or B, a C, a D, or an E, a G, whatever you like, but also that the costs of making your properties more energy efficient needs to be factored in. That'll hit how much you can borrow, that'll hit how much you can sell for, that'll hit how much you can rent for. That's coming. Operating costs, the three highest costs of occupancy are salaries, rent, and utilities. And the one that you can control the least is utilities. You can fire people, you can move, you can sublet space, but when it really comes down to it, it's the market that dictates your energy price. The marketability and competitiveness, everyone's made a big thing successfully, I think, about, quote, green, unquote. Well, translating green into dollars and cents or pounds and pence, I think, is going to make a big difference. People want a better green environment, a sustainable environment, a cleaner environment in which they work. But we actually now have tenants like Skanska who are monitoring the productivity and sick days and health in their offices. I think that through CSR, a lot of companies are auditing that internally themselves. And it turns out that sustainable, green, more efficient environments actually are healthier. More appropriate lighting makes for fewer headaches by the end of the day. Better balancing of air conditioning and heating reduces complaints for too hot, too cold, which is the number one complaint in any building around the world. And that all yields to better efficiency. It's return on investment. This is what it's all about. Next slide, please. So I wanted to just point out the Empire State Building. We had a $550 million program. I want to just put this into perspective. The Empire State was a 2.9 million square foot building. About a 270 million square meter building. And if you take about $75 million off of that $550 million number, because we redid our lobby, which is a national and a local landmark, and we received tons of awards for the fact that it took us 2 years to redo our lobby and restore the ceilings and the murals, which everything was wonderful until you realize it only took 13 months to build the building. And if you look at that, however, at about $475 million and 2.85 million square feet, it actually is a little over $120 a foot, roughly, which is for a building doing a complete total gut rehab, including refit of tenant spaces, is actually a pretty reasonable number for a building which was so incredibly disabused of quality for so many decades. $13 million was the additive cost for doing our energy efficiency work. What do I mean? Well, I mean that out of that $550 million, an awful lot of money that we are planning to spend, once we got the Clinton Climate Initiative, Johnson Controls, Jones Lang LaSalle, Rocky Mountain Institute, the team approach into it, we spent that same money, but we spent it differently. Then we actually took $7 million for cogen out, because what we realized is we actually, by doing the building more efficiently, had surplus power in the building. We didn't need to add power. So our net additional costs out of the $20 million, which was uniquely done for energy efficiency, was only $13 million. We have about $4.4 million in savings a year as we reduce our energy consumption in watt and kilowatts and BTUs by a guaranteed 38.4%. But Johnson Controls, whose balance sheet guarantees our savings, only guarantees 90% of our savings. Consequently, the actual savings are in excess of 40%. Our payback is about 3 years. This number here speaks to the fact that actually $106 million of expenditure were touched by our work, although only $13 million of net additional expenditure occurred. Next slide, please. This is an interesting graph, because when my wife and I, my partner in business, Jonathan Rose, is here, and he's going to be on a panel or speaking at some point later in this conference. My wife and Jonathan are on the board of the Natural Resources Defense Council together. My wife and I, really getting the bee in our bonnet, started something at the Natural Resources Defense Council called the Center for Market Innovation, which is all about trying to commercialize on a broad scale sustainable practices and change Walmart, change the world, so to speak, instead of do stuff out of your garage. And early on in this center's incarnation, the then director came to me and said, well, I'd like to show you something. And he gave me this incredible PowerPoint presentation with a flip book all about energy efficiency retrofits in the built environment. Now, we were working in secret at this time to develop this program at the Empire State Building. And I was shocked, because there are all these incredible graphs and everything. I said, where did you get this information? And he said, well, we had a consultant do it. I said, what did you pay the consultant? He said, about $10,000. I said, $10,000? I knew Johnson Controls, Jones Lang LaSalle, ourselves, we're committing, in effect, millions of dollars of effort to prove or disprove that this would work. I said, does any of this stuff exist? He said, no. It's all just presentation stuff based on hypotheticals. I said, okay, this is not hypothetical. This is actually a chart that can be produced if you apply the same process which we developed at the Empire State Building, which, by the way, is non-proprietary, it's open source. It is, we don't own it. It's not patented. We did it to be copied and replicated. You can actually iteratively calculate all of the different options in energy conservation as you look at a total refit of your building, and you can choose the point where you want to be. That NPV midpoint, which is the payback period, we targeted a 5-year payback. As it turns out, our payback will be shorter. But this gives you an idea of what you spend and what you can save. And it's this drop-off here, where you really stop getting progress. This is